All right, guys, listen, thanks so much for joining me here. My name is Frankie. I've been doing e-commerce for nearly 15 years now, which is kind of shocking to me. And today I'm going to talk you through my journey so far and give you the highlights. And we're going to talk a bit more specifically about international trade, obviously. So in my 15 years, I've started and scaled 2 e-commerce brands to 7- and 8-figure revenue. So I'm going to talk to you about some of the top tips and insights I've had from creating those brands. First of all, does anyone know who this is? This is Alan Watts. He's a very famous British philosopher. And one of the things he said is, all saints need sinners, all sages need clowns. So you can't have one without the other. And what I'd like to add on to this is that all fulfilling work needs bullshit problems. You can't feel fulfilled with your work, you don't have to deal with these bullshit problems, and international trade is full of them. So don't worry about it, it's all part of the journey, and it's what makes it fun. The first few years of my e-commerce journey, I was known as the Snood guy. So for those of you that aren't familiar with what a snood is, this is a snood. Specifically, this is a football snood. So back in 2011, it was the coldest winter in British history, and footballers started wearing these neck warmers to keep their necks warm, because obviously the necks get really cold when you're playing football, apparently. So the snood became a craze, and I was playing Sunday League football at the time. So I went to JD Sports to buy a snood, and they didn't have any snoods. I went to Sports Direct to buy a snood, and they didn't have any snoods. So I was like, hang on a minute, maybe I should sell snoods. And that's exactly what I did. That is how I got into e-commerce in the first place. I sold snoods on eBay. 2 years later, that was what got my foot in the door. And 2 years later, I created my first proper e-commerce brand. It was a sportswear brand called TCA. I started with £100 of my own money. We never took any outside investment. 2 years later, TCA was a 7-figure business. We ended up growing the team to about 9 people at its peak. We worked with some of the biggest athletes, influencers, and celebrities, and most of the time we didn't have to pay these people. Featured in all of the magazines and newspapers, and we had tons and tons of 5-star reviews all over the internet. Even the Prime Minister was a customer. So if you want advice about ambassadors, come to me. The thing that shocks people most about the TCA story is that we did all of this with the vast majority of our revenue coming through Amazon. At 95%, this was an Amazon-based business. Now, I don't run TCA anymore, and I'm going to tell you about how that story ended at the end of the presentation. But 3 years ago, I launched my second brand, Potted. And at Potted, we make home pottery kits for adults. And unlike TCA, Potted is a vast majority of our revenue comes through Shopify, and a small minority comes through Amazon. So we've got 2 completely different brands, products, customer bases, and marketplaces. So Potted is now a team of 15. We're doing 8 figures in revenue now. We've got a very active social media following and community. And so it's completely different businesses, completely different products, completely different customers. But there is one thing that I wanted to share with you guys, which I think is a really important principle for both those businesses, how I was able to do both of them completely different, and I think for all e-commerce brands. So this is a little tongue-in-cheek, but I do believe that this one simple trick is the key to a successful e-commerce business. And I will warn you in advance that when I tell you what it is, you will be disappointed. But like Alan Watts would say, all the most important things in life are very simple and obvious. So the one simple trick to dominate e-commerce is to have a great product. I told you you're going to be disappointed. I'm going to demonstrate how true this is with a story. So at TCA, I wanted to create our first men's running shorts. And I decided to make a massive effort to make the best pair of running shorts that I could. So I bought samples from all my competitors and I analyzed them. We had people testing all the samples. We got customers on the phone to ask them about their experience with their current running shorts and what they would change. I sent out surveys. I had customers come into my office and talk to them one-to-one. I flew to China, to the Canton Fair, if anyone knows that. It's the world's biggest trade show. I walked around every single stand in Canton Fair, spoke to every single supplier, touched every piece of fabric to try and find the one I wanted for this pair of shorts. What we found out was, at the time, a lot of running shorts didn't have pockets on, which sounds surprising. The ones that did have pockets often didn't have a zip on the pocket. And the ones that had a pocket and a zip, oftentimes the pocket was too small to hold a smartphone, which were getting bigger and bigger at the time. So 2016, we launched the TCA Men's Elite Tech running short with pockets that were big enough for a phone and a zip on it. Boom, straight to #1 on Amazon. So it's the #1 best-selling running short on Amazon UK. And that was in 2016 we launched this, and they're still #1 to this day. So that's the power of starting with a great product. Even Boris was a fan. So the principle here is the great product. Basically, how we're running our e-commerce businesses, we're doing same things every day. We're trying to drive more sales. We're trying to get repeat business. We're trying to get more reviews. We're trying to lower CPAs. All of these metrics that we're constantly trying to optimize every single day for the next 5, 10, however many years you're going to be working on this business, all of that becomes a lot easier for you if you start with a very good product. It's very simple, but I think a lot of people miss that. So this is a principle of leverage, which is like what I try to apply to everything I do. What's a relatively small action that I can do that will have an outsized effect on the other end? For me, having a great product and investing in great products is the highest leverage thing we can do in our businesses. So let's talk about the international side of these brands as well. So like I refer to it as the jungle because sometimes it's a bit chaotic. There's a lot going on. It can be a scary proposition to get your stuff going internationally. So a bit of context. At TCA, we launched our products in Europe very early. And in the US, we waited quite a while. So 2012, I started the brand, and it wasn't until 2017 that we tried to go to the US. By the end of 2020, the UK was our third biggest market, and it was a small percentage of the overall revenue of the company. That's how important international was. I see this all the time. People start a brand, start a business, and they go ham on the UK, and they want to build the UK as big as they can. And then one day they're like, oh, I'm struggling here to generate more sales. How can I get some growth? I know what I'll do. I'll go to Europe or I'll go to the US. My advice is not to do that. My advice is to go international as soon as you're ready and don't delay it. The key point here is as soon as you're ready. So you have to have a proven product market fit. You have to have some traction and an offer that customers actually like. At that point, my advice is you go international as hard and fast as you can. And here's a few reasons why. First of all, don't miss the boat, very simple. So for TCA, we got to Germany. Germany turned out to be a big market for us for compression sportswear. And we got there just in time before all our competitors piled in. So we ended up taking huge chunks of that customer base. However, in the US, we were too late. So that running short that I mentioned, which was like driving so much of the revenue in the UK and Europe, absolutely flopped in the US because there was already too much choice for customers there. So we missed the boat, so don't do that. Who doesn't love a lovely moat, a nice protective moat around your business, right? Your competitors can't wade through it. You should get to international markets as soon as you can and start building this moat. If you're on Amazon, it's very obvious. You want to get your reviews count up. Your reviews is your biggest moat. If you start earlier than others, it's very hard for them to catch up with you. But if it's not about Amazon, think about how you're going to grow this brand and sell this product in the local market. You're going to need to reach out to influential people, whether it's actual influencers themselves or people that drive taste in that country. And there'll be a relatively small group of these people that you want to engage with and get on board with your brand. So if you get there first, they're with you. They're not with your competitors. That's a moat. This is a huge one. Having different markets just de-risks the business massively, and it gives you different levers you can pull when things go wrong, which they inevitably will. So I don't know if anyone else has the experience. You wake up one day, you've got an email. Guess what? Your stock's stuck at Felixstowe or some port, and the customs paperwork isn't done right. So you're delayed. Okay, worst case scenario is Q4, it's Black Friday. Excuse my French, but you're fucked. When you're not fucked is when you've got 8 other countries that are picking up the sales volume for you, and you're not reliant on the UK. So it's about de-risking your business. We've had things go wrong as well. We have like compliance issues with a local country. And again, it's just not that big a deal if you've got 7 or 8 other regions where you're making good sales. A lot of people don't realize you can improve your margins. So you can launch your same product in a different country and customers are willing to pay more for it. It's hard to predict in advance which markets and which products that will work for, but that has happened to me consistently. With Meta, you can drive down your CPAs because it's learning from like tons of different inputs. So overall, the marketing efficiency will be improved. And a big one for us is like, who doesn't love stockpiling their goods? So like I say, Q4, Black Friday, big sales periods. We love to have a load of stock because the worst thing that can happen is we run out of stock. Well, the second worst thing, the worst thing is that you have too much stock and you bankrupt the business, which I also nearly did. When you've got tons of international markets, you can stockpile a lot it's a lot less risky, because again, if one country is failing to pick up sales, you've got however many others you've launched in that are picking up those sales for you, and you can redirect stock to those places. If you launch internationally early, then you can put your processes in place early, and it saves a lot of headaches later. So building translation into your SOPs, domains, like you want to go into the US and someone's got your .com, like it's just good to solve these problems earlier. And then kind of going back to what I said before is, if we're building our brand and we're struggling for traction in the UK, we're struggling for sales, then we decide we want to go international. That now is a distraction, because ultimately you've got underlying fundamental problems with the business that you should be solving. And then trying to do all this international paperwork and processes, it becomes a distraction and a negative for you. So how do we conquer the jungle? I'm going to give you, the next few slides, forgive me, are mostly text, but it's a bit like a playbook and a checklist of things that we do that you can follow if you wish. Feel free to take a photo of the slides if you prefer. So boom, number one, get compliant. Very simple, like correct taxes, you register all these different numbers you need. We use Avast. If people are looking for someone to handle tax, we use Avast. It's not very expensive, and they do all the EU for us. A big one for me is the safety certificates and packaging. Different countries have different needs, like you've got a different icon for Germany and Italy or whatever. So check all that stuff, because otherwise you put the stock in that country and all of a sudden you're flagged and you can't sell it. Big problem. How do you do all of this work? It's too much work. You've got to hire some cost-effective labor. There is some seriously good talent in the Philippines and Pakistan. We go Philippines mainly for admin, customer service, and that type of work. Pakistan, we've had very good fortune with operations and forecasting talent. These guys are amazing, and just because they live somewhere else, you can have them much more cost-effectively. Building your SOPs. So we use iSearch from to try and work out what the people in the local markets are trying to search for in relation to our products. A top tip would be to avoid using a freelancer to do all your translations, because they're very expensive. Sorry, freelancers. ChatGPT is quite good, but you get the freelancer to come in. ChatGPT does the 80%. Freelancer comes in and does the final checks. Simple stuff. Shopify Markets for EU. An important thing as well is it can feel overwhelming to do all of this, but you can start small and use a hybrid model. So again, if you want to go with a 3PL in your local country, which is obviously going to help your shipping times and your costs, then I would say send in only your top 20% of products first, the ones you know are most likely to sell. And as you get successful, you can start bringing in the next 10%. If you're not comfortable to do that, you can do an export-only model. So this means you're just shipping it from the UK to an international customer. It sounds bad because your shipping times will be quite long, but in our experience, the customers don't mind as much as we think they will. And you can do your top 20% in the 3PL and the other 80% export, fulfilled from the UK. And then again, I don't know if people are familiar with this, but I think there's this idea out there that you can't, if you're going to ship something to some countries, you're going to have to pay a lot of duties and taxes, or the customer will, which is true for the EU. I can't help you with that. But US, Canada, Australia, and some others, there's nothing to worry about. You just ship them the goods as long as it's under $800. So that can work as well. If you've got an ad that's working in English, get a local person in the country that you're interested in to redo it in a native tongue. We've tried other ways, and this is the best way, because it's just the way they speak, customers can just understand them better. And again, it's the 80-20 principle here. You don't have to do this all at once. Pick your top 20% of markets that you think you're going to be successful, your top 20% of products, and do those first. The other stuff can follow later. And those are my top tips. That's our playbook for international expansion for an e-commerce brand. And you're just going to be flying through the jungle, no worries, like Tarzan. How much time have I got? Okay, he doesn't know. So I wanted to end with stuff a bit about mentality, because I think it's important, the mindset. If you're running a brand or you're working in a brand, cheers, we got ages, I'll slow down. I wanted to do a bit about mindset. I think it's important, and it's kind of the thread that flows through a lot of the stuff that I'm talking about, and I believe is how I've become able to get some success in e-commerce. So how did this TCA story end? I ran that brand for 9 years, And after 9 years, I started to get a little bit burnt out, a little bit tired of it. And I felt like it's time for me to move on. And a lot of entrepreneurs go through this. They build, they hustle so hard, they're grinding for years, and one day they wake up and they're like, you know what? I don't want to do this anymore. I've got some other stuff I'd rather do. What do I do now? No one thinks about it. And I was exactly the same. I hadn't thought about how this story was going to end. So when I wake up 9 years later and I decide that I want to move on, I have to work out how. And I decided what I was going to do is something I'd never thought about, never done before. I was going to try and sell the business. And this was a kind of all or nothing moment for me because, like I say, 9 years of hard work, my entire 20s spent on this business, and I haven't taken any money out of it. So it's either going to die a death now, and I'm going to have nothing to show for all my blood, sweat, and tears, or if I can pull it out of the bag, I'm going to get a life-changing moment in my business career. So the stakes are very high for me. And this is where Ed Sheeran comes into the story. So I live in Camden, northwest London, and Camden's very famous for live music. There's a bar right opposite, a live music venue, opposite my flat, which is called the Barfly. And Ed Sheeran used to go and perform there before he was famous. This is where this guy was cutting his teeth. So around 2010, 2011, Ed Sheeran would turn up at the Barfly and he would perform a couple of songs at, say, 7 o'clock on a Tuesday night in front of whoever happened to turn up. Ed Sheeran would then pick up his guitar, walk down the road, and perform another gig at a second venue at 8 o'clock. He would then get the bus across town somewhere to a third venue and do another gig at 9 o'clock. So this is back in the day when Ed Sheeran and all of his peers in the music industry are desperately trying to make it. And everyone else around him is doing a very, very reasonable 1 gig a week to get exposure and to get experience. But Ed Sheeran is gigging 3 times a night. This guy had a very clear vision of what he wanted to become, and he was completely unreasonable in his approach in achieving it. So here I am trying to sell my business, and I decide I'm going to be like Ed Sheeran on this. I'm going to take things to the extreme. So I go out there and I learn everything I can about buying and selling a business. I read all the books. I listen to all the podcasts. I call up anybody who I've ever met who's sold a company before, who's bought a company before, who's been involved in any way in a deal to buy or sell a business. And then I ask them to refer me to 2 other people that they know that have done those things. I'm absorbing as much information as humanly possible to try and make this a success. I heard about this book about 5 years before on a random podcast. I spent about 2 hours digging up this podcast episode, scrolling through it to hear the reference to this book, just because I thought there might be a little gem in it for me. So what happens when you try and sell a business, as I found out, is most of the time you get referred to a business broker, and they kind of like take you under their wing and they say, we're going to do all your financials, we're going to go out to the buyers and we'll make this happen for you. And most of the time it does work, so no problem with brokers. But usually you get referred to somebody by your network, and that's who you end up going with. But don't forget, I'm Ed Sheeran right now. I get referred to one broker, I say it's not good enough for me. I go and call every single business broker in the UK. And then I think, you know what, I'm going to check international as well. I'm going to speak to every broker I can find out there until I find the one that I think is perfect. And that's exactly what I did. So I've learned as much as I can about selling a business. I found a broker that I like. The broker's main job is to create an information memorandum, an IM. It's basically a PDF or a PowerPoint document that everybody will see when they think about whether they're interested in buying this business or not. So it's the most important document in this process. And it's the big piece of what the broker does. So the broker produces our IM, and this is what it looks like. And then I took one look at this and I said to myself, I'm Ed Sheeran right now. I'm being unreasonable about this, and there is no way I'm going to go to market with something that looks like that. So on that day, I called up Andy, who was my old graphic designer. Andy left the company about 5 years before. I said, Andy, I know you've got a job now, but for the next 2 weeks on the evenings and weekends, you're going to work with me, and we're going to make the best IM that anyone has ever seen. 2 weeks later, this is what we had. So we learn how to do buying and selling a business. We find the best broker for us. We redo all of their work, which we're paying them for, because we're not happy with it. And we get an IM that we're really happy with. We go to market. Good news is we start to get some interest back. Not loads, to be honest with you, but it only takes one. So we start to get a couple of nibbles here and there. And so it's good news. It looks like we might be able to sell this thing. But what's going to happen next? We're going to have to negotiate this deal. And like I said, this is 9 years building up to this one moment. I'm going to leave no stone unturned. So what do? what would Ed Sheeran do? I learn everything I can about negotiation. I read all the books, I listen to all the podcasts, I call up some tutors that run courses, I create a PowerPoint presentation and give it to my friends and family about effective negotiating, because I think that teaching is the best way to learn. Learn about the business, got the broker, redo the IM, learn to negotiate, sit down across the table with these guys that want to buy the brands. We negotiate the deal hard, we negotiate smart. And 3 years ago in 2021, I struck the deal and we sold the company for a really good price. It was a life-changing moment for me, and I got the outcome that I wanted. Happy days, spent some money, splashed out on some really nice silver balloons. And the reason I was able to achieve that, I believe, is because I modeled this attitude that I got from Ed Sheeran, which is being completely unreasonable at this vision I had to sell this brand. So the 3 points maybe for takeaway today would be, number one, let's leverage a great product. If you've got control of what your product is, focus on that. If you don't, then try to make it happen in the business. Number two, once you've got the great product and you've got the product market fit, and once you're got some traction going, go international as soon as you can. Do not delay it. And number three, if you can apply this attitude of being unreasonable about achieving those goals across everything, then I think there's a good chance that we can be successful. Thank you so much, guys. It was a pleasure.